Hi everyone, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing some natural dyeing on a selection of different fabrics and wools and things. I'm going to be using turmeric to dye my fabrics. I get a really nice sort of bright orange colour out of it. This is a really useful way to sort of give a bit of new life to some of your natural fabrics during your lockdown. If you can't get out and buy fabric dye, use something that's in your cupboards. Turmeric's brilliant. If you've ever cooked with it, you know that it stains pretty badly, so it works really well as a dye for fabric. I've already got the dye mix in my bucket here. I've got it set up on a towel on the floor. If you rent where you live, cover the floors so you don't get turmeric on the floor because you'll never get it out. What I'm going to be dyeing is this wool scarf. So you can only really dye natural fabrics, so wool, linen, silk and cotton will all dye. This, you can obviously see this is green and quite dark, and you're thinking, well, how is that going to work? It's a natural fabric, so it will still soak up some colour. What will happen is it will over dye this colour, so it will kind of come out a dark mustardy yellow, or at least I'm hoping it will. The lighter parts of the pattern will come out a brighter yellow. Either way, I think it's going to give it a new lease of life in a colour that I really love. I've also got a lace doily. I can't actually tell you whether or not this is proper natural fabric, but I'm going to try it anyway. Found this in a charity shop ages ago. I've got a whole load of them. Thought I might dye it, see what happens. I've got a swatch of random fabric. Again, pretty sure this is cotton, but can't really remember what it was when I bought it, so I'm going to chuck it in and see what happens. And then I'm also going to dip dye this linen wool just to see how that comes out. So this should be perfectly fine because linen's natural, it should take on the colour perfectly well. So for your dye mix, you're going to need, depending on how much you're dyeing, I haven't got a lot in this bucket because I'm not putting anything too huge in here, but the basic sort of ratio is 1 gallon of water to 1 cup of white vinegar. I used white wine because I haven't got plain white, just white wine, so I'll just use that. And 3/4 of a cup of turmeric. And then you have to bring it to the boil on the stove. Make sure it sort of mixes, blends, dissolves down, and then you cool it down, and then it's ready to dye your fabrics with. Now the vinegar is a mordant, so when using a mordant, I've added it to the actual mix, but you can soak your fabric in it first and then add that to the mix afterwards. It depends on what you want to do. I've heard that's a better way round for doing it for dyeing with nettles, but mine's in the mix, it's been cooked with it. So that's my dye mix in the bottom of that bucket there. As you can see, yeah, not too much. A little bit of it would have cooked off while I was heating it up as well. It's just in a random bucket as well. It's a sort of multi-purpose bucket that does all the dirty jobs for us. I've also got a stirring stick. I did used to have a wooden spoon dedicated to dyeing fabric, but apparently that's gone missing. So just a plain stirring stick for mixing while you're cooking the mix, but then also you need to agitate the fabric while it's in there as well, so we'll use it for that. Now before you dye any of your fabrics, you need to make sure that they're clean. So you can either pop them in the washing machine and give them a wash. Keep them damp, because everything needs to be damp when you dye it. It sort of helps the dye attach itself to the fabric, just like the vinegar does. So I've already washed the scarf previously, so all I did was just make everything a bit damp and cold water before I started. I'm going to start with the linen wool first, just because I want enough space in the bucket for me to effectively dip dye it. So essentially what I'm going to do is just sort of dip it in, take it back out, dip it in again, take it back out. I'm hoping for a gradient along the bottom of the linen wool, so I don't really know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. Just going to make sure it's even in length on both sides, and go for it. Just dip in as far as you want to, as high as you want the fabric to come up. If any of you do macrame at home and you want to dye your macrame tapestries, you can do it like this as well. You can sort of dip the ends into some dye and you'll get a nice sort of colour wave across the bottom. Again, it would have to be natural wool for that to work. It's kind of like, you know when you get a cheap packet of curry noodles? Got that kind of colour going on right now. that's the first dip. I'm going to let that drain a little bit and then dip it back in again. Obviously, if you need to put your hands directly in, as it is turmeric, put some gloves on, because otherwise you're going to have completely yellow hands and it'll be really difficult to wash it off. So I'm going to go in again, not quite as high up, but I'm going to leave it in the dye for a little bit longer. Getting a slight gradient there. Looks a little bit better on camera actually. Looks like it's working though, so I'm just going to let that drain again and then dip the ends one more time, I think. I'm just agitating the mix a little bit. There is still a fair amount of turmeric in there that's not mixed into the water. So I'm figuring if I move it around a little bit, it might encourage some of it to cling to the wool a little. You would normally do this anyway, even if you were dyeing with man-made dye, because the agitation sort of helps the dye to stick. It's not looking too bad. Of course, if you wanted a really light effect, you could just dunk it in super quick and take it back out again, and you'll get sort of a really pale kind of dye to it. But that's taken on quite well. If you were to have a full ball of natural wool, you could even dip dye the ball wrapped up, half in and half out, and you'd probably get a really nice sort of colour blend off of that. I don't know, might be worth a try. A separate bucket in the front. Just going to set that down in that so that the turmeric doesn't get all over my carpet or the towel. So for everything else, it's just going to go in this bucket and sit there, ideally overnight. I think I'm going to come back and check it in the afternoon and see how it's all doing. The scarf might need to be left overnight, but the doily and the cotton swatch might just need a few hours. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to chuck it in, we'll check later. On. That was a really quick dip there. You can see the really light gradient you've got on that. That's going to go in for longer than that though. Use your stirring stick to make sure all of the fabric in the bucket is covered over with the dye. Come back to it every half hour to an hour and give it a stir for 10 or so minutes. If you're leaving it overnight though, perhaps not worry too much about the agitation, because it's going to be in there long enough for all the dye to soak in anyway, so you might not have to do it for that. There we go. Kind of looks like spinach. Spinach in a curry. That's exactly what that looks like. We're going to leave that for a few hours. I'll come back later and show you what's happened to some of the fabric. I'm just going to take the dip dyed tassel downstairs. It needs a quick wash out in cold water, and then it just needs hanging up to air dry. It's a really bright sunny day today, so hopefully it won't take too long on the washing line. But when it's done, I'll show you what it looks like. It's late evening now, and most of the stuff I've got is dyed. I'm quite pleased with the dip dyed linen. So you can see it's gone sort of a pale yellow gradient, which is kind of what I was after, so that's good. What I did with this one, actually, after it dried, I thought, oh, it's not quite yellow enough for me, so I came back upstairs and I dipped it again and then dried it again after washing it in the sink, and I got that sort of darker yellow out the bottom. Now the the doily, look at that. Look how bright that's come out. It's almost unreal how yellow that is. It's quite crispy at the moment where it's been out of the sun drying. And then the cotton swatch has done exactly the same thing. It's super bright yellow, like marigold yellow. And that's also gone quite crispy. It's all crisped up in the sun. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. Clearly that is a natural fabric, which is good to know. Must be cotton. The scarf, on the other hand, I actually think I'm going to leave that overnight and show you what it looks like tomorrow. Because I think where it's darker, it's just going to need more time to take on as much colour as possible. But the lighter parts of it have already gone a decent yellow, so I'm hoping for good results from that one, but you'll have to wait and see. It's not come out too bad. It's subtle in some places where the wool hasn't taken on the dye quite as much as I'd like it to, but generally speaking, I think that's now fairly yellow. Nice. So as I said before, once you take your fabric out of the dye, wash it out in cold water till the colour stops running out of it. A bit like when you dye your hair, once the colour stops running out, that's time to stop washing and then just hang it out to dry. You can obviously do them in the washing machine after that with some softener if you're worried about how crinkly some of them get, but there's no reason why you couldn't do this on clothes if you wanted to wear something that brightly coloured. You can also use other ingredients to make other dyes. So blueberries, for example, will yield a sort of purpley blue dye. You can use beetroot to get red. Obviously when you use that it stains your hands when you're cutting it, so it will dye fabric as well. You can use things like nettles for green. The only advice I have for using fruit when dyeing is that you should use salt as your mordant instead of vinegar. It works better with the fruit to help the colour stick to your fabrics. I hope you've enjoyed it again today, guys. Get dyeing. If you've got clothes or curtains or bed linen or anything like that that you're tired of, rather than just throwing it away, get the dyes out. Make it a new colour. Make it you. Why not? I shall see you again next week for another video. Bye guys.